In a quiet corner of the countryside, far from the noise of cities and untouched by the speed of modern life, there was a small village where the days passed slowly and the nights were lit only by the soft glow of the moon. The people there lived simple lives, growing crops, tending to animals, and relying on the river that curved like a silver ribbon through the land. Among them was a boy named Ian, the youngest son of a humble farmer and a basket weaver. Their home was a modest mud house with a thatched roof and a single room shared by the whole family. They had little money, but they carried themselves with dignity and worked hard for what they had. While most children in the village followed the rhythm of their parents' lives, Ian was different. His mind was full of questions, his eyes full of curiosity, and his heart full of dreams far bigger than the boundaries of their fields. Ian had a way of noticing problems that others accepted without question. He saw how the women of the village walked for hours each day to fetch water, how children struggled to read at night with only a flickering oil lamp, how farmers fought against the dry earth when the rains failed. He asked why things had to be this way, but the answers he received were always the same. It had always been like this, and there was nothing to be done. But Ian could not believe that. Deep inside, he felt there had to be a way to change things, even if he did not yet know how. One year, when Ian was 14, the rains were late and the river dried up earlier than anyone could remember. Without the river, the crops shriveled, the soil cracked, and the animals grew thin from thirst. The women had to walk twice as far to find a well that still held water. Ian watched his mother return each day with heavy pots balanced on her head, her shoulders bent and her back aching. It pained him to see her like this, and he knew that in other villages people had access to wells and pumps that brought water closer to home. He decided he would find a way to build something similar for his own village. With no money for tools and no training in engineering, Ian began searching for anything he could use. He scoured junkyards and abandoned sheds, gathering broken bicycle parts, rusted pipes, scraps of metal, and old wooden beams. He studied the few books he could borrow from the schoolteacher, poring over the drawings of simple machines. Night after night, he sat under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, sketching designs on scraps of paper, trying to figure out how to build a hand pump from whatever materials he could find. Each attempt brought failure. Pipes leaked, joints broke, and water refused to rise. His hands became blistered and his fingers raw, but he did not stop. Some of the villagers laughed when they saw him working. They told him he was wasting his time, that such things were for the government or for people in cities, not for a boy from a forgotten place. Ian listened, but did not let their words take root. He kept trying, learning from each mistake, adjusting his designs bit by bit until one day, the water finally came. He turned the handle of his rough wooden pump, and a clear stream gushed out, cool and pure. The villagers gathered, touching the water with disbelief, and their laughter turned to cheers. The elders, who had once dismissed him, now asked him to build more pumps. With their help, Ian installed several across the village, ending the long daily walks for water. Word of his invention reached a teacher in the nearby town, who was impressed enough to help him apply for a scholarship to study in the city. Leaving the village was the hardest decision Ian had ever made. He had never been farther than the markets in the next district, and the city felt like another world. Crowded streets, towering buildings, and people rushing everywhere. He carried only a small bag, a few changes of clothes, and the quiet determination that had carried him through so many challenges. The city was not kind at first. His classmates mocked his accent, his worn clothes, and his simple manners. Some teachers doubted he could keep up, but Ian reminded himself of where he had come from and what he had already achieved. He poured himself into his studies, learning not just from his books, but from every conversation, every discarded machine, every problem he could try to solve. When others spent their free time in markets or cafes, Ian was in workshops, dismantling old radios, testing solar panels, or building models from spare parts. His first major city project was a solar-powered lamp made from recycled bottles and LED strips. It was cheap to produce, easy to repair, and could provide light for homes without electricity. When an NGO learned about it, they partnered with him to distribute the lamps to rural areas. Families wrote to thank him, telling him their children could now study at night, and their homes felt safer after dark. Encouraged, Ian moved on to other ideas. A fuel-efficient stove that used half the firewood of traditional ones, reducing smoke inhalation and saving time for women who cooked daily. Then came a pedal-powered irrigation pump that allowed farmers to water their crops without expensive motors or fuel. As his reputation grew, so did the opportunities. He was invited to speak at schools, then at universities, and finally at conferences where leaders and innovators gathered. But no matter how far he traveled, Ian always returned to his village. Each time he came back, he found it changed. There were new pumps, solar lights on doorways, and healthier crops in the fields. The same people who had once doubted him now welcomed him with open arms. Years passed, and Ian's work expanded to hundreds of villages. Governments began adopting his low-cost designs, and charities used his methods to improve communities in other countries. Yet, if you asked him about his proudest moment, his answer was always the same. The day he saw water flow from the pump in his village for the first time and saw the relief in his mother's face. That moment was worth more to him than any award or recognition. Ian's journey was not without challenges. There were times when funding ran out, when projects failed, when partnerships fell apart. There were nights when he lay awake wondering if he had taken on more than he could handle. But each time, he reminded himself that every invention began with a single problem and the will to solve it. He had learned from his village that change was not sudden. It was built one step at a time, with persistence and patience. He never allowed success to distance him from his roots. He wore the same kind of simple clothes he always had, spoke to everyone with respect, and made sure to credit the people who worked with him. When young people asked for advice, he told them to start where they were, with what they had, and to never let the size of their dreams scare them into silence. He told them that even the smallest place could produce an idea big enough to change the world. By the time Ian was in his 30s, his innovations had touched millions of lives. There were solar lights in villages that had never seen electricity, water pumps in places where women once walked half a day for water, and farming tools that helped families grow enough food to feed themselves and sell at markets. The boy from the small village had become a symbol of hope, not because he had more than others, but because he had started with less and refused to give up. When he walked through his village now, the children followed him with wide eyes, some clutching notebooks filled with their own sketches and ideas. He saw himself in them, the same hunger to learn, the same curiosity that once made him ask why things were the way they were. He encouraged them to keep drawing, keep building, and keep dreaming, no matter who told them it was impossible. In quiet moments, Ian would sit by the river that had once dried up and caused so much hardship. It still flowed gently now, thanks to improved water management and the pumps that drew from underground reserves. He thought about how far he had come, from a barefoot boy with nothing but determination to a man whose ideas had crossed borders. He knew there was still much work to be done, but he no longer feared the scale of the challenges ahead. He had learned that change began with the courage to take the first step, no matter how small. His story spread far beyond his country, translated into many languages, told in classrooms, community centers, and even in places he had never heard of. People who had never met him were inspired to start their own projects, to solve problems in their own communities. That, more than anything, was what he wanted, to prove that one person could spark a chain reaction of change. Ian's life was proof that greatness was not about where you started, but about what you chose to do with what you had. He had turned scraps into solutions, doubt into determination, and isolation into inspiration. And as long as there were problems to solve and people willing to solve them, he knew the world could always be changed, even from the smallest of places.